I buried my wife with an empty casket because the ocean never gave her back. For 8 years, I carried that grief like a stone in my chest. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Savannah, Georgia, I saw her walking out of a bakery holding a little boy's hand and calling another man honey. I didn't move at first. I just stood there on the sidewalk with a paper coffee cup in my hand, watching the dead woman I had loved for 21 years laugh like she had never disappeared at all. Before I tell you how that moment broke open every lie I had been living under, welcome to Revenge, Act T Stories. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight, because this story begins with a funeral. But it ends with a courtroom so silent, you could hear my wife stop breathing for a second. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 54 years old now, but when this all began, I was 46, married to a woman named Claire, and convinced I understood my life. Claire and I lived in Richmond, Virginia, in a 2-story brick house with black shutters and a maple tree out front that turned red every October. I owned a small marine inspection business, nothing flashy. I inspected boats, insurance claims, docks, and private vessels for people who wanted to know whether something was seaworthy or about to become an expensive mistake. Claire worked part-time at an art gallery downtown. She was beautiful in a quiet way, the kind of woman people noticed before she ever spoke. Auburn hair, sharp blue eyes, and a smile that made you feel like you had been chosen. We had one daughter, Emily, who was 19 when her mother died. Emily was away at college in North Carolina, studying graphic design, and she loved her mother with the kind of blind devotion daughters often have, before life teaches them that parents are just people wearing costumes. To the outside world, our marriage looked solid. Inside the house, things had been colder for years. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold. Claire had become distant around the time she turned 42. She stopped laughing at things she used to laugh at. She started protecting her phone like it held state secrets. She would go out for gallery events and come home smelling like expensive cologne I didn't wear. When I asked questions, she smiled like I was embarrassing myself. "Daniel, don't become one of those men," she'd say. "What men?" "Insecure ones." That word followed me around our house for years. Insecure. I wasn't insecure. I was watching my wife slip away one locked screen, one late dinner, one fake smile at a time. But I loved her, and when you love someone, you can mistake silence for patience. You can call your own fear loyalty. You can keep setting the table for someone who has already left emotionally, because their body still walks through your front door. The cruise was supposed to fix things. That was Claire's idea, a 7-night Caribbean cruise for our 21st anniversary. She booked it herself, said we needed warm air, no phones, and a chance to remember who we were. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored everything strange about it. The way she insisted on a specific cruise line, the way she pushed me to buy additional travel insurance, the way she suddenly became affectionate 2 weeks before we left, touching my arm in the kitchen, calling me Danny again, wearing the old perfume from our honeymoon. I remember thinking, maybe we still have a chance. That was the first lie I helped build with my own hands. The ship left from Miami on a Saturday in late April. The first 2 days were almost perfect. Claire held my hand on deck. We ate dinner under soft golden lights. We danced once, slowly, awkwardly, like two people trying to step back into a room that had already been burned down. On the third night, she wore a navy dress and silver earrings. I remember those earrings because I had given them to her 10 years earlier. We had dinner at a small restaurant near the stern. She drank white wine. I had coffee because my stomach felt off. At some point, she leaned across the table and said, "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we had both become different people?" I laughed a little because I thought she was being sentimental. "Every married couple wonders that," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "No," she said softly. "I mean really different." Later, I would replay that sentence so many times it felt carved into my bones. After dinner, we walked on the upper deck. The wind was strong. The ocean was black. Most people had gone inside because a storm was moving somewhere far off, not close enough to worry the crew, but close enough to make the ship roll gently beneath our feet. Claire said she wanted to go back to the cabin and change shoes. I said I'd wait by the railing. She kissed my cheek. That was the last time I thought my wife was alive. 23 minutes later, a crew member came running past me, with a radio pressed to his mouth, then another, then alarms, then voices. I didn't understand until a security officer grabbed my shoulders and asked my name. "Mr. Mercer, When was the last time you saw your wife? I remember the deck lights buzzing overhead. I remember the salt spray hitting my face. I remember saying, "What do you mean?" They said Claire had gone overboard. A passenger claimed they saw a woman near the restricted crew access area, then heard a scream. The ship began procedures. Searchlights cut across the water. People gathered in robes and jackets, whispering behind their hands. I stood there until morning. They never found her. The cruise line told me they were sorry. The Coast Guard searched. Statements were taken. I answered questions until my voice stopped sounding like mine. When we returned to Miami, I flew home alone with Claire's suitcase. Emily collapsed when I told her. My daughter didn't cry at first. She just stared at me, then whispered, "You were supposed to keep her safe." That sentence became the second funeral. Claire's memorial was held 6 days later in Richmond, empty casket. White roses, a framed photo of her on the altar. People came up to me and touched my shoulder. They said things like, "At least she didn't suffer," as if they knew. My mother, Ruth, stood beside me the whole time. My younger brother, Paul, handled the visitors when I couldn't speak anymore. Emily wouldn't stand next to me. She sat in the front row with Claire's sister, Marlene, who kept glaring at me like grief had turned me into a suspect. After the service, Marlene cornered me near the parking lot. My sister was unhappy, she said. I looked at her, too numb to be angry. "She's loved you," I said. Marlene's eyes were cold. "She settled for you." I should have walked away. Instead, I just stood there and took it, because when someone dies, everyone thinks pain gives them permission to be cruel. But I didn't know the worst part yet. 3 weeks after the memorial, an insurance investigator contacted me. Claire had a life insurance policy I knew about. It was modest, enough to cover the mortgage and help Emily finish school. But there was another policy, a large one, $2 million, taken out 11 months before the cruise, with me listed as the beneficiary. I stared at the paperwork until the numbers blurred. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't asked for anything. I didn't even know the policy existed. When the investigator started asking whether Claire had been depressed, whether we argued, whether I had financial problems, I understood exactly where the shadow was falling, on me. For 4 months, I lived inside suspicion. Neighbors stopped waving. People at church gave me soft looks that were not comfort. Emily barely answered my calls. Marlene told anyone willing to listen that Claire had been afraid of me. That was a lie. A clean, sharp lie. But lies don't have to be true to damage a man. They only have to be repeated by someone who looks sad enough while saying them. The insurance company delayed payment. The cruise line settled nothing. The official conclusion was presumed accidental death. But the words felt weak. Too clean, too easy. I didn't want money. I wanted my wife back, or at least the truth of how I lost her. Instead, I got an empty grave, a daughter who blamed me, and a town that whispered when I walked into grocery stores. I sold the house 2 years later, not because I needed money. Because every room had become a museum of questions. Claire's closet still smelled faintly like her perfume. Her half-used lotion sat in the bathroom cabinet. In the kitchen, there was a chipped mug she always used on Sunday mornings. I packed it all in boxes and moved to a smaller place near Savannah, Georgia. I told people I wanted a slower life. The truth was, I wanted to be somewhere nobody knew the version of me that had stood beside an empty casket. For 8 years, I lived quietly. I worked. I took on inspections along the coast. I called Emily every Sunday, even when she didn't answer. Slowly, painfully, she came back to me. Not all the way. Grief had changed her. Suspicion had poisoned something between us. But she became my daughter again in small pieces. A text on my birthday, a Christmas card. A visit one summer where we walked along the river and she finally said, "Dad, I'm sorry I blamed you." I didn't make her beg, I just hugged her and said, "You were 19, because she was. And 19-year-olds do not understand that adults can be broken without being guilty. By the 8th year, I thought I had made peace with the shape of my life. Then I saw Claire at Magnolia Street Bakery. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of Georgia afternoon where the air feels warm, but the shadows already know. Winter is coming. I had finished an inspection at a marina and stopped for coffee. I was checking my phone near the bakery window when the door opened. A small boy came out first, maybe 6 years old, wearing a green dinosaur backpack. Behind him was a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair holding a box of pastries. Then came Claire, my dead wife. Her hair was shorter, darker now, cut just above her shoulders. She wore sunglasses, a cream sweater, and jeans. There was a thin gold band on her left hand. I felt my body go cold from the inside out. The coffee slipped from my hand and hit the sidewalk. She turned at the sound. For 1 second, her face opened, not confusion, not surprise, recognition, then terror. She grabbed the boy's shoulder too quickly. The man looked at her and said, "Laura, you okay?" Laura. She had a new name. Claire looked at me for half a second longer, then smiled at the man. "I'm fine," she said. "Just thought I saw someone." Her voice, 8 years later, I knew that voice better than my own breathing. I wanted to shout her name. I wanted to run into the street and grab her shoulders and ask why she had let our daughter mourn her. But I didn't. Something old and cold settled over me. Something stronger than panic. I had spent 8 years being accused, pitied, avoided, and haunted. I was not going to waste the truth by screaming it in front of a bakery. So I turned away before she could see what my face was doing. I walked to my truck, sat behind the wheel, and shook so hard my keys rattled in my hand. Across the street, I watched her climb into a silver SUV with the man and the boy. The license plate was Georgia. I wrote it down. That was the first smart thing I did. The second smart thing was calling nobody. Not Emily. Not the police. Not even my brother. Because a dead woman walking around under another name is not a conversation. It is evidence waiting to be handled carefully. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and searched the plate through a contact I knew from insurance work. I'm not proud of pulling that favor, but I needed a name. The vehicle was registered to a man named Graham Whitaker, Otter in Savannah. Spouse listed on a property document, Laura Whitaker. Laura. I stared at that name for a long time. The woman who had once signed birthday cards as Claire Mercer had become Laura Whitaker. I found social media next. Graham's page was mostly private, but not enough. There were photos from charity events, school fundraisers, a beach trip, a neighborhood barbecue. And there she was, not hidden, not buried, standing beside Graham with her hand on his chest, smiling beside the little boy, whose name appeared in one caption as Oliver. Laura and Oliver made the best cupcakes again. My wife had not only survived, she had built a new family within driving distance of the life she destroyed. I clicked through every photo I could find until dawn painted my kitchen windows gray. In one picture from 4 years earlier, she wore a sundress and stood under string lights in someone's backyard. Graham's arm was around her waist. The caption read, "5 years with this beautiful woman." 5 years. That meant she had met him 3 years after disappearing. Or that was the story they told. But there was another possibility, one that made my hands curl into fists on the table. Maybe Graham had never known the truth. Maybe he was just another man who believed her lies. I needed proof before I could decide. So I did what grief had trained me to do. I stayed quiet. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a patient man in a way I had never been before. I hired a licensed private investigator named Anthony Vale, a retired federal agent with tired eyes and a voice like gravel. I told him enough to make him understand, then showed him Claire's old photos and Laura's current ones. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was crazy. He just looked at both pictures, leaned back, and said, "Same woman." Hearing another man say it almost knocked the air out of me. Anthony spent 14 days building a file. Laura Whitaker had no birth record that matched her claimed age. Her Social Security history began 7 years and 9 months earlier. Her previous address was in Charleston under the name Laura Bennett, but that name also led nowhere before a certain point. She had married Graham Whitaker 6 years earlier in a courthouse ceremony. Oliver was listed as their son, but Oliver was adopted. That detail hit me strangely, not because adoption meant anything wrong. A child is a child. But because Claire had always told me she never wanted another baby after Emily. She had a whole life, I said, looking at the report in Anthony's office. Anthony tapped one page with his finger. She had help getting it. The page showed a name I had not expected. Marlene Price, Claire's sister. A transfer of $48,000 from Marlene's account to a Shell consulting company 7 weeks after the cruise. Another transfer 18 months later. Emails linked to old domain registrations. A storage unit in Florida rented under Marlene's name 1 week before the ship sailed. I felt something in me turn to stone. Marlene had stood at my wife's memorial in black lace, crying into tissues, while knowing her sister was alive. She had watched Emily sob beside an empty casket. She had let people look at me like I might have killed my wife. And she had helped. But there was still one question I could not answer. Why? Claire could have divorced me. She could have taken half of what we had. She could have moved away, changed her life, hated me in peace. Why fake death? Why destroy her daughter? Why make me carry suspicion for 8 years? The answer came from a place I had almost forgotten. A safe deposit box. Before the cruise, Claire and I had shared one at a local bank in Richmond. After her death, I closed most accounts, but the box stayed active because it held old property papers from my father and Emily's birth certificate copy. I kept paying the annual fee automatically. I flew back to Richmond on a rainy Thursday. The bank clerk looked bored as she led me into the vault area. She left me alone in the small viewing room with the gray metal box. Inside were documents I remembered. My father's deed, savings, bonds. Emily's baby hospital bracelet in a small envelope Claire had saved. And beneath those, a sealed manila envelope I had never seen. No label, no date. Just my name written in Claire's handwriting, Daniel. My fingers went numb. For a minute, I just stared at it. Then I opened it. Inside was a flash drive and 3 pages of handwritten notes. The first line said, "If you are reading this, then something went wrong, or I lost my nerve." I sat down hard in the little bank chair. The letter was not an apology. Not really. It was a confession written by someone who wanted to feel tragic instead of guilty. Claire wrote that she had been unhappy for years. She wrote that she felt invisible. She wrote that being my wife and Emily's mother had become a life sentence made of kindness. That sentence still makes me sick. Then she wrote about a man named Adrian Cole. Not Graham. Adrian was a financial consultant she had met through the gallery. He was charming, divorced, and apparently very good at convincing lonely women that they deserved to become reckless. They planned to disappear together. The cruise was his idea. The insurance policy was his idea. The restricted deck access, the false witness, the pre-packed bag left near a service corridor. His idea. Claire was supposed to vanish during the cruise, be moved off the ship with help from a crew contractor Adrian had bribed, and start over with him in the Caribbean until the investigation cooled. The insurance money, once released, would eventually be moved through Marlene. But something went wrong. Adrian betrayed Claire after she disappeared. He took the emergency cash and left her in Nassau, with fake documents that were not as complete as he had promised. Marlene helped her get back into the United States under another identity. Claire ended the letter by saying she did not expect forgiveness. Then she wrote one line that made my hands tremble with a kind of anger I had never known. "Emily is young enough to heal, and Daniel is stable enough to survive. Stable enough to survive." My wife had measured my pain like a man checking weather conditions. She had decided our daughter could grieve. She had decided I could be suspected. She had decided her freedom was worth our ruin. I plugged the flash drive into an old laptop I had brought with me. There were scanned documents, 8 times, a copy of the insurance policy application with my forged signature, photos of fake IDs, a short video of Claire sitting in what looked like a hotel room, rehearsing a statement in case she was ever caught. In the video, she cried without tears. "I didn't want anyone hurt," she said. I paused it there. Because only a certain kind of person can build a bomb under a family and still call themselves gentle. I copied everything. Then I called Anthony. After that, I called a lawyer. Her name was Miriam Ellison, a sharp, silver-haired attorney in Richmond who had once represented my business in a liability dispute. Miriam did not waste words. She read the letter, watched the video, reviewed Anthony's report, and then looked at me over her glasses. "Daniel," she said, "your wife didn't disappear. She committed fraud. Identity fraud, insurance fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and likely more. Her sister may be exposed too." I sat across from her, feeling older than 54. "I don't care about prison," I said quietly. "I care about my daughter knowing I didn't do anything." Miriam's face softened a little. "Then we do this the right way." The right way was slow, painfully slow. We contacted federal authorities through proper channels. We submitted the evidence. We did not confront Claire. We did not warn Marlene. We did not tell Emily yet, because Miriam said if Emily contacted her aunt in shock, everything could collapse. That was the hardest silence of my life. Every Sunday, Emily called and asked how I was. I lied. "Doing okay, sweetheart." But I was not doing okay. I was carrying the truth that her mother had chosen to abandon her, and I knew once I handed it over, there would be no version of Emily's childhood left untouched. About 6 weeks later, the investigators confirmed what we already knew. Claire Mercer was alive. Laura Whitaker was an assumed identity built through fraudulent records. Marlene had assisted financially. The man from the cruise, Adrian Cole, had died 3 years earlier in Costa Rica under suspicious financial circumstances. But that was no longer my concern. The insurance company had never paid the $2 million policy because the investigation had remained unresolved long enough that legal disputes froze it. That was one mercy I did not even know I had been given. But there was still damage: my name, my daughter's trust, the years. You cannot sue someone for stealing 8 years from your chest, but you can make sure they do not keep living comfortably on top of the grave they dug for you. The authorities wanted to arrest Claire quietly. Miriam advised something different for the civil side. "We file first," she said. "Wrongful fraud claims, emotional damages, forged financial documents, conspiracy. We create a public record. Then when the criminal side moves, she doesn't control the story." I knew what she meant. Claire had controlled the story for 8 years. The grieving wife, the unhappy woman, the possible victim, the mystery. I had been a shadow in the background of her lie. Not anymore. The first time Emily learned the truth was in Miriam's office. I asked her to come to Richmond and told her it was important. She arrived irritated, worried, and a little scared. She was 27 then, stronger than she had been at 19. Her hair was darker like her mother's, but her eyes were mine when she was angry. "Dad, you're scaring me," she said. I couldn't answer at first, so Miriam slid the envelope across the table. Emily read the letter. I watched my daughter lose her mother a second time. Not through death, through truth. Her face changed slowly. Confusion first, then denial, then horror, then a kind of silence I recognized because I had lived inside it for 8 years. When she reached the line, "Emily is young enough to heal," she covered her mouth. "No," she whispered. I said nothing. She looked at me with tears running down her face. "You knew, only for a few weeks, and you didn't tell me?" I wanted to, but we had to protect the case. She stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Protect the case?" she said. "That's my mother." Her voice cracked on the last word. I nodded. "I know." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You don't know what this means. I hated you for part of my life because of her. I thought maybe you had missed something, or done something, or failed her somehow." "I know." She started crying harder. "I let Aunt Marlene tell me you were cold. I let her say Mom felt trapped. I let her make me look at you like you were dangerous. That sentence hurt, but I didn't defend myself. A father does not win by making his daughter feel smaller in the moment she understands she was used. I just opened my arms. For a second, I thought she would walk out. Then she folded into me like she was 19 again. "I'm sorry, Dad," she sobbed. I held her and looked over her shoulder at the wall. "There's nothing to be sorry for," I said. But there was, just not from her. 2 months later, Claire was served with civil papers at the Whitaker house in Savannah. Anthony was there from across the street. He told me later that she opened the door wearing gardening gloves. Graham stood behind her, confused. Oliver was at school, thank God. A process server asked, "Laura Whitaker?" She said yes. Then he asked, "Also known as Claire Mercer?" And according to Anthony, her face went white. That same afternoon, Graham Whitaker called my lawyer. Not angry, died. He did not know. At least, that is what his own attorney later established. Graham had believed he married a widow from South Carolina, with no living family except a sister she rarely discussed. He believed her first husband had been abusive, that she had escaped a painful past, and that she had no children because speaking of them hurt too much. Claire had not only erased me, she had erased Emily. When Graham learned there was a daughter who had mourned her mother for 8 years, he reportedly walked out of the house and took Oliver to his brother's place. That detail mattered to me more than I expected, because I had hated him for a few weeks. I had imagined him laughing with my wife, touching her hand, living in my stolen place. But he was not my replacement. He was her next victim. The court hearing for the civil case happened in Richmond, because much of the fraud began there. By then, the criminal investigation was moving too, but the civil hearing came first regarding asset freezes, identity questions, and preservation of evidence. Claire appeared under her real name for the first time in 8 years. She walked into the courtroom wearing a gray suit, no jewelry except that thin gold band. Her hair was pinned back. She looked older, but not enough. Not 8 years of grief older, not empty casket older. Marlene sat behind her. Emily sat beside me. When Claire saw our daughter, something flickered in her face. Emily did not wave, did not cry, did not move. I had prepared myself for anger when I saw Claire again, but what I felt was stranger. I felt the final thread snap. The woman sitting across the courtroom was not my wife returning from the dead. She was a stranger wearing the face of someone I had loved. Claire's attorney tried to frame her as a desperate woman trapped in an emotionally neglectful marriage. He said she had made terrible decisions under extreme psychological distress. Miriam stood calmly. "Your Honor," she said, "we are not here today to litigate a divorce that never happened. We are here because Mrs. Mercer allowed herself to be declared dead, forged her husband's signature on a multi-million-dollar insurance policy, abandoned her daughter, assumed a false identity, and lived for 8 years while my client carried public suspicion for her supposed death." The judge, a stern man named Harold Benton, looked over the documents with an expression that did not change much. Then Claire asked to speak. Her attorney tried to stop her, but she insisted. She stood. "For the first time in 8 years, I heard my wife say my name in a room full of people. Daniel," she said softly. "I never meant for it to go this far." Emily made a sound beside me. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Claire looked at her. Emily's face hardened. "Don't call me that." The courtroom went still. Claire swallowed. "I was unhappy," she said. "I was drowning. I expected pain. Instead, I felt clarity." "You were on a cruise ship," Emily said, her voice trembling. "We were the ones drowning." Claire flinched. That was the first time I saw real damage land on her. Not from the law, from the daughter she thought was young enough to heal. Miriam then presented the safe deposit letter. Claire's attorney objected to parts of it. The judge allowed enough for the hearing. Then came the flash drive, the forged signature, the emails, the false identity records, the transfer from Marlene, the storage unit, the video when Claire's own face appeared on the courtroom screen. Rehearsing her lines in that hotel room, she closed her eyes. In the video she said, "Daniel is stable enough to survive." Miriam paused it right there. Then she turned to the judge. "Your Honor, that sentence is the heart of this case." Nobody spoke. I looked at Claire. For 8 years, I had imagined asking her why. I had pictured shouting, crying, demanding answers. But when the moment arrived, all I said was, "You should have left me honestly." Claire stared at the table. "You would have hated me." I almost smiled, not because anything was funny, because after everything, she still thought hatred was the worst consequence. "No," I said quietly. "I would have divorced you. Emily would have cried. We would have survived the truth. What you gave us was a grave." Marlene broke down behind her. The judge ordered assets associated with Claire's false identity preserved. He referred several matters to federal authorities. Already involved, he granted our motions to proceed under Claire's legal identity and allowed the civil claims to move forward with the evidence record intact. But the moment everyone remembers came after the judge asked Emily if she wished to make a statement for the record. I did not know she had prepared one. She stood slowly, holding one sheet of paper. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. "My name is Emily Mercer. I was 19 when my mother disappeared from a cruise ship. For 8 years I believed she died. I blamed my father. I lost time with him because adults around me fed that suspicion. My mother was not dead. She was hiding. And the cruelest part is not that she left. People leave families every day. The cruelest part is that she made us mourn her so she would not have to face us." Claire covered her mouth. Emily kept going. "I do not want revenge against my mother. I want the truth to be louder than the lie. I want my father's name cleared in every place it was damaged. And I want Claire Mercer to understand that children do not heal from being abandoned, just because the parent who abandoned them finds a new life." When she sat down, I reached for her hand. She let me take it. That was my real victory, not the court, not the evidence, not Claire's ruined second life. My daughter's hand in mine. The criminal case moved after that. I won't pretend it became some dramatic movie ending where everyone gasped and justice landed in one clean strike. Real justice is paperwork, delays, hearings, signatures, phone calls, and waiting rooms with bad coffee. Claire eventually accepted a plea agreement on several fraud-related charges. Marlene's role was exposed too. She avoided the harshest outcome by cooperating, but her reputation in Richmond was finished. The same people she had whispered to for years learned she had helped bury a living woman. Graham divorced Claire. From what I heard through attorneys, he fought to protect Oliver from the worst of the scandal. I respected that. The boy was innocent. He had not chosen any of this. Claire wrote me 3 letters. I read the first one. It began with, "I hope one day you can understand." I stopped there. Some sentences tell you everything about the apology before you waste your time reading it. I gave the other 2 letters to Miriam unopened. Emily read none of them. She went to therapy. So did I. Not because we were weak, but because sometimes the truth arrives like a hurricane, and you need help rebuilding the house inside your chest. 1 year after the courtroom hearing, Emily and I went back to Richmond together, not for court, not for lawyers, for the cemetery. Claire's empty grave was still there, with her name carved into stone. Beloved wife and mother, dates, a lie in granite. Emily stood in front of it for a long time. "What do we do with this?" she asked. I looked at the stone. For years, that grave had been the place where my life ended and kept going at the same time. Now it looked smaller, sad, but small. "We don't have to do anything today," I said. Emily nodded. Then she placed a small white envelope at the base of the stone. "What's that?" I asked. "A goodbye," she said. I didn't ask to read it. Some grief belongs only to the person carrying it. We walked back to the car under a gray sky. Just before getting in, Emily turned to me. "Dad? Yeah? I don't want her lie to be the biggest thing in our family." That sentence did what no court order could do. It gave me permission to live forward, so that's what we did. Emily started visiting more. We built new memories slowly. Coffee on Sunday mornings, bad movies at Christmas, phone calls that lasted too long. She asked me about my business. I asked her about her designs. We learned each other again without Claire standing between us like a ghost. I sold the last of the items I had kept from the old house, except one. The chipped mug, not because it belonged to Claire, because it belonged to a version of me who had loved honestly. I refused to let her betrayal steal that too. People sometimes ask whether seeing Claire alive gave me closure. No closure sounds too neat. What it gave me was proof. Proof that I had not imagined the strange details. Proof that I had not failed to save her. Proof that my daughter and I had been victims of a choice, not fate. And proof that the truth can take years to arrive. But when it does not knock politely. It kicks the door open and turns on every light. The last time I saw Claire was not in court. It was months later, outside a federal building, after one of the final proceedings. She stood near the steps with her attorney, looking tired and smaller than I remembered. Emily was not with me that day. Claire saw me and asked for 1 minute. My lawyer started to object, but I said it was fine. Claire walked toward me slowly. For a moment, I saw flashes of the woman from the cruise deck, the navy dress, the silver earrings, the kiss on my cheek. Then I saw Emily at 19, collapsing into a chair. The flashes stopped. "I did love you," Claire said. I looked at her for a long time. Maybe she expected anger, maybe forgiveness, maybe some final emotional scene she could keep for herself as proof that she had not been a monster. I gave her none of that. "I know," I said. Her eyes filled with tears. "Then, why do you look at me like that?" "Because loving someone does not make what you did smaller," she cried then. Real tears, I think. But I had learned something by then. A person can cry for the consequences and still not understand the wound. She whispered, "Do you think Emily will ever speak to me?" "That's not mine to answer." "And you?" I looked at the woman I had buried, the stranger who had worn my grief like a disguise. "I said goodbye to you 8 years ago," I told her. "The difference is, now I know you heard me." Then I walked away. I didn't look back, not because I was strong every second. I wasn't. I sat in my truck afterward and cried until the windows fogged. I cried for the man on that cruise ship staring into black water. I cried for the daughter who lost her mother twice. I cried for the years I spent defending myself against a crime that had never happened. But after that day, something inside me finally set the weight down. Not all of it, just enough to breathe. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been blamed for a lie someone else created, I want you to hear me clearly. Stay steady. Keep your receipts. Do not let loud people rewrite your silence into guilt. Because sometimes the person everyone thinks is gone is only hiding from the truth. And sometimes the person everyone suspects is the only one strong enough to wait until that truth comes home. How did this story make you feel? If you had been in my place and saw someone you buried walking around with another family, would you confront them right there? Or would you stay quiet and gather proof? Would you forgive Claire? Or would you walk away forever? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and subscribe to Revenge Act Stories for more emotional stories about betrayal, truth, and the kind of revenge that doesn't need shouting. Because in the end, I didn't destroy my wife. I simply stopped protecting the lie that kept her alive.